We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Monday, but more importantly, it's December 25th. It is Christmas Day for those of you that celebrate Christmas. Now, you know what's more pathetic than a guy doing a podcast on Christmas Day? It's all you goofy fucks listening to it. What are you doing? Go be with your family. My goodness. Don't you have better things to do than listen to this podcast? Or if you're on YouTube, watch it. Now, of course, I'm kidding. We all have different things going on in our lives and different times. You may be watching this after all the celebrations are over. I get that. I'm just fucking playing with you here. But I really like Christmas more so than I have in a long time because I think Christmas is for kids. And if you don't have young kids around, it's not as fun. It's just not as fun. I mean, I've gone through many Christmases. My sons are adults. You know, you basically get them a card and hand them some money because you don't know what the hell to buy them. So when you have a Christmas with children, especially if you have grandchildren, I know with mine, my 3-year-old granddaughter, it was fun. I had to be told to stop buying things, which was never a problem before. But when that little girl popped up, she can have pretty much whatever she wants. She comes up, says anything, I'm going out to buy it. She likes Bluey, which is a cartoon. She likes Elmo. She didn't have an Elmo. So I said, we got to go get an Elmo. My wife said, well, you can't buy that much. I said, she loves Elmo. How do you have a kid that loves Elmo not get an Elmo? So I got an Elmo and a Bluey. Anyhow, it got me thinking about when I was a child. And, I always talk about my mom and my dad and how my dad was kind of an asshole. But I don't want you to think that I grew up in a horrible life. I didn't. I didn't. My mom was a wonderful parent. And if there's any good in me or my siblings, it came from her. And my dad was kind of a narcissistic asshole, but he made a good living. So we always lived pretty well, you know. You always had something to eat. You had a nice house. You always got nice gifts at Christmas. I just have to say, I wasn't shorted in that regard. Um, but I think people ask a question sometimes about what was your favorite gift as a child? And I've heard people tell me a lot of different things. And I'm always reminded about one story in my childhood where I think I received the best gift ever, ever. And I'll tell you about it. This was in South Minneapolis, where I grew up. There's my brother and I. I was like 7, he was like 6. It was Christmas Eve. We go to bed. We're in our racing car, footy pajamas. We go to bed as early as we can because we want to get up and we don't want to scare off Santa Claus. So we go to bed and we get up. My brother and I start walking down the steps to the living room. We see the tree. We see some presents under the tree. We see the stockings hung up. We didn't have a fireplace, but we had stockings and they were full of candy and bullshit. Anyway, we see this and we're going down there. We're going to tear into this stuff, which is probably not what my mom preferred me to do, but that was the plan because that's the kind of kids we were. Anyway, we get to the bottom of the stairs and something strikes us or catches our attention. You see, there's a red ribbon laying on the ground, and it just seems like it's going on forever. So I look at the ribbon and I see an arrow that basically says, follow the ribbon. So my brother and I look at each other like, what the fuck is this? But we're 6 and 7, so we didn't say the F word, but we were probably thinking it. So anyway, I pick up the ribbon. My brother and I start following the ribbon through the living room. We get to the dining room, another arrow. We get through the dining room, another arrow, and we're in the kitchen now. And then we go over to some steps, which will take us down the basement. So this long ass ribbon keeps going. We get to the steps of the basement. Another arrow says go downstairs. So we go downstairs. And as we get to the bottom of the stairs, there it fucking is. There's this huge racing slot car set. Now, if you're too young to know what a slot car set is, Google it or ask somebody over 50 and they'll fucking tell you. Because at that point in the 60s, getting a slot car racing set was cool. But when you got this massive one put on a piece of plywood, and I say it's massive only because I was 6 or 7, it seemed massive. We get downstairs and my brother and I are freaking out. Coolest racing set ever. So we start racing around. My dad comes down, we race around, and it's a lot of fun. And I always think of that as my best present. But it wasn't the racing set that was my best present ever. It was the effort that my mom put in to make that day even more special, to put us on an adventure, to give us something exciting to do, to get us to follow that ribbon and go downstairs. And actually, in retrospect, my mom was probably doing it for logistical purposes, knowing that we would come downstairs and have no idea that there would be another present in the basement. But still, that's how my mom was. She'd always have us doing things, making masks out of paper bags and craft things. But as I got older, at the time I didn't realize it, but as I got older, I realized there was a lot of thought there, and she cared enough to make it exciting for us. And that's the gift that I think is the best gift I ever got. The fact that a mom looked at her 2 kids and said, Christmas is cool, but I want to make it a little more fun, a little more interesting, give these kids an adventure. She didn't have to do that. It could have been easier for her, but that's what she did. And for me, that is probably the best present I ever received. My mom's long gone now, but I always think about that. And I can't say I've ever been able to repeat that. Um, Given the circumstances of my own kids with Christmas and now my granddaughter. But I'd love to be able to be smart enough and thoughtful enough to do something like that. You know, it's funny when you're a kid and even when you get in your teenage years, you don't think of anything of it. But when you get older and you experience parenthood and grandparenthood and you look at these kids, you realize she was thinking pretty deep here. She really cared about making it special for us, and she did. She absolutely did, and for that, I'm ever thankful for her and for that effort because there were many efforts like that. She would do absolutely anything for you. Okay, I'm sure you've got a lot of answers to it. I did this on TikTok, and everybody said, "Oh, I had a train set. Oh, I had a Beezy Bake Oven, or whatever." And if you want to let us know what your favorite gift was, send me an email, rationalboomer@gmail.com. You know I read emails, and I've got one coming up that we're going to have on the program. But I also have a traditional note. You can see that. This is an interesting one because this gentleman sent me a book that he wrote. Now, the book is written by Professor Politiverse. I don't know if that's his real name. No, his real name is Matthew, but Professor Politiverse. And it is a political book. You can see it here. Now, you notice something. It obviously has the Donald Trump hair. And the name is Green, Biggs, and Graham. Does that sound familiar to you? Well, it's a takeoff of Green, Eggs, and Ham. That's pretty clever. And it's a book about politics. I promised Matthew that I would read it, and I didn't have to promise him that. I want to read it. It looks interesting. It's an easy read. It's got a lot of pictures and stuff. So I'm going to read it, and I will let you know what I think about it. And we'll talk about where you can get it and all that sort of stuff. But he wrote me a note. So I thought it's not an email, but it's a note, and I'm going to read it. He says, "Hello, Mike. So I just came upon your show yesterday in a roundabout way, but now you got a new fan. Really enjoyed your conversation with Tony Michaels. So I'm a late boomer as well, born in 63, and that means I come with the requisite dad jokes. One of my sounds like puns become the seed of an idea for a book. My book, Green, Biggs, and Graham, follows along the good Dr. Green Eggs and Ham for the first 24 pages or so. And then my protagonist goes off on the proverbial Trump I am character for 50 plus pages. Give it a read if you like it. I'd greatly appreciate a good review on my Amazon page. I'll do that. The QR code will take you right to where you can make that review. Also, feel free to share a few pages with your audience. I self-published the book last October before the midterms. I'm not a book marketing guru, so it didn't sell or have the impact I would have liked. But I'm going to rework it a bit as we approach 2024 election and add a couple of other verse pieces in the writing. Keep up the great work. I'll be listening to your podcast. Take care. Matthew Clark. Well, Matthew, I will read the book. It does look interesting. It is clever. And it sounds like you're of a like mind. So I have no problem with reading it. I'm looking forward to it. And once we get past the Christmas holidays here, I will do that and we'll talk about it. In fact, if you want to come on the show, you certainly can. If you're new to the podcast, you may not know this, but if you're a listener of the podcast, you are qualified to become a guest on the podcast. I don't normally have people on the podcast to sell books, but this is an unusual situation. You're a listener, you're of a like mind, and I'm expecting the book to be pretty entertaining. And if you're pretty entertaining, I'd want you on the show because I'm not that entertaining. And anytime I can get somebody on to give me a hand, well, fuck, I'm all for it. So anyway, it's called Green, Biggs, and Graham, obviously on Amazon. And I'll give it a read. I'll let you know what I think. All right, we do have an email as well. The email comes from Paul. He says, "Hey, Mike, I was just curious. I don't know the answer myself. Once the candidates from both parties are announced, is a presidential debate mandatory? I don't think it's mandatory, but it's traditional. They almost always do it. Both sides have something to gain from doing it." He goes on to say, "I would love to see that orange turd up there without a teleprompter telling him what to say. Even with one, he manages to make a fool of himself. Without one, he has the potential to have a complete meltdown in front of the entire nation. I would love to see that happen. More so, I would love to see if his blind, loyal, ignorant sheep would still follow him. Thanks again for all you're doing, Paul." Yeah, I don't know how he would get out of that. He wouldn't be able to suggest, well, I'm beating Joe Biden so bad I don't need to do it. But here's the thing, Paul. I don't think it'll ever come to that because, as I've said, I don't think he's going to be the nominee. A lot of bad shit's going to happen between now and that point, where we have the convention, the Republican convention. And I was just watching somebody, a reporter of some sort, talking to some insiders within the Republican Party, asking them if they have a plan B should Donald Trump get convicted, for another candidate. He claims there is no plan B. So maybe he does become the nominee in spite of all the possibilities of a conviction. But I honestly don't think the conviction is what's going to keep him out of it. I just don't. I think that other stuff is going to come to light. The pressure is going to get immense, and something's going to happen where he's not the nominee. And if the Republicans don't have a plan B, well, they are fucked. I mean, they're fucked for the 2024 election anyway, but they're going to be really fucked. They really don't have anyone that has any sort of strong presence, anybody that can compete with Donald Trump. And the problem they have is if Donald Trump is not the nominee, it's conceivable his dumbass base won't vote for anybody. And then they still have a problem. People worry about Donald Trump becoming president or just the nominee. And I've said before, there's so many things working against him. I don't know why you would worry about that. Because even if he does become the nominee, he doesn't have a prayer in hell. So there's all these ifs, ands, and maybes. If the Supreme Court does this or they don't do this, Donald Trump's not getting out of this. He's got 91 felony charges against him. He's got a judge that's going to take everything he owns, including all of his money. Donald Trump's issues are so big and so devastating. He's not somebody you should really worry about. And all these other things are imminent. It's not hopes and dreams and maybe it's going to happen. The judge in New York is going to take his shit away. That's going to happen probably within the next 30 days or less. We know that this immunity thing is going to be turned away by the appellate court and ultimately the Supreme Court. If it takes a little longer, so the fuck what? Once that is gone, he literally has no defense in any of his cases. And regarding the taking his name off the ballot in Colorado, I've heard some interesting takes from some very respected legal minds. One of them, Neil Katyal. And what he's saying is that the way the decision was written in Colorado, it's going to be very difficult for the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn it. Now, whether that's true or not, I'm not sure, but I do trust Neil Katyal, and I like to think positively. Now, think about that. If the Supreme Court upholds the Supreme Court in Colorado's decision to take him off the ballot, immediately we're going to start seeing him fall off the ballot on a number of states. Ultimately, it could be all of them. If they don't overturn it, they just turn it back to the states. Right now, we've got 12 to 16 states in the process of trying to do exactly what Colorado did. Donald Trump's prospects for the election in 2024 are problematic. He's got so many fucking problems that I don't know why anybody worries about this clown. And I don't know why the Republican Party is trying to come up with a alternate plan. They're definitely going to need it unless they're ready to just let this fucking thing burn. So after 2024, they can start over. That may be their best bet. There's nothing really they can do to fix what's been damaged to this point, what Donald Trump has done to that party. So maybe they let it burn down and then after 2024, they try to come back in 26 with a whole new look. I mean, that's ultimately what's going to happen. They can't continue doing what they're doing. Now, the base might continue to try to pull that off, but they're a small percentage of the Republican Party, and the Republican Party isn't going to be too fond of losing all the time. And frankly, that's all they've been doing since after the election in 2016. They won that election with Donald Trump, but after that, they haven't won shit. They keep losing, and it keeps getting worse. And what we saw in 2022 was not a red wave. It was a loss, essentially, for the Republican Party. And I can tell you this, the prospects for the Republican Party in 2024 are worse than they are in 2022. And we don't even know how bad it's going to be because there's a lot of shit that's going to go down the river between now and then. There's not a lot of positivity about the future of the Republican Party. They don't have a lot they can bank on. And this is why I'm not worried about it. They've got so many problems, it's fucking ridiculous. I mean, it's like a football team whose quarterback, running back, wide receivers, and defensive line are out with injuries. You got no fucking chance. And that's kind of how the Republican Party is positioned right now. All right, we may have talked about this yesterday. I don't recall, but it's worth talking about again because it's so ridiculous. And it has to do with what I was talking about with the Supreme Court. Saturday, late Saturday night, Donald Trump urged a federal appeals court to throw out the federal election. Actually, it was Saturday night, last night. No, the night before. I don't know. I'm retired. I don't even know what day it is most days. Every day is like fucking Friday to me. Anyway, Donald Trump urged a federal appeals court to throw out the federal election subversion criminal case in Washington, D.C. again, arguing in a filing late Saturday that he is protected under presidential immunity. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, yeah, he already did that. Yeah, he's done it a few times, and every time he's failed. But he's doing it now again in D.C. There's going to be some decision coming out of the appellate court. They're going to have arguments on January 19th. Shortly after that, they'll have a decision because it's so ridiculous, so frivolous. There is no way that they're going to agree with Donald Trump. And then it will go to the Supreme Court, and there's no way he can win in the Supreme Court. Just not going to fucking happen. There's too much chaos that would occur if they agreed with Donald Trump. And there's no basis in law. They would look absolutely silly. So if you're worried about Donald Trump, given this immunity where he can do virtually anything, don't worry about it because it's not a big deal. It's a joke. And the courts understand this. Now, Trump wants the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals to overturn a lower court ruling rejecting his claims of immunity in special counsel Jack Smith's election subversion case. The appeals panel is weighing Trump's request with the Supreme Court on Friday when they refused to take it up on an expedited basis. The filing reiterates what the former president's lawyers have repeatedly asserted, that Trump was working in the official capacity as the president to ensure election integrity when he allegedly undermined the 2020 election results and therefore his immunity, and that his indictment is unconstitutional because presidents cannot be criminally prosecuted for official acts unless they are impeached and convicted by the Senate. None of that is true. Mitch McConnell said that. William Barr said that. That's all bullshit. That's just made up shit in order to try to confuse the situation. But the court isn't going to be confused by it. They're not going to side with Donald Trump under any circumstances. You can worry about a lot of shit in this country and a lot of shit with politics. No way Donald Trump gets immunity, because then every president gets immunity, including Joe Biden. And that's problematic for the Republicans. If Joe Biden had any kind of criminal tendencies, they think he has. We know he doesn't. He probably wouldn't take advantage of it, but some other Democratic president might down the road. So there's a problem with the Republican Party. I've said it before. They don't look beyond the end of their nose. They think they can do shit and get away with shit, but no one else will ever do it. And that's just stupid. I mean, whenever you take some tact, you've got to look down the road a little bit. Not only see what it's going to do for you now, but see what it may cost you down the road. And they don't do that. But the federal courts and the Supreme Court know what kind of problems this could create. And they're not just not going to let it happen. The Constitution establishes a powerful structural check to prevent political factions from abusing the formidable threat of criminal prosecution to disable the president and attack their political enemies. This is what Trump's attorneys wrote. Before any single prosecutor can ask a court to sit in judgment of the president's conduct, Congress must have approved of it by impeaching and convicting the president, they wrote. That did not happen here, so President Trump has absolute immunity. Well, he was, in fact, impeached. The Mueller report showed that he was guilty of at least 10 occasions of obstruction of justice. Now, we know there's some bullshit note that went out or a memo that went out that says you can't indict a sitting president, but William Barr and Mitch McConnell both said that does not mean that once he's no longer president, that he can't be indicted and charged. That is the law. That is the way it is. Now, basically what Trump is trying to do is delay the March 4th trial in D.C. That one may be the most devastating, and he's using this immunity claim. The appeals court has expedited its consideration for his appeal, and it's set to hear oral arguments in the matter on January 9th. District Judge Tanya Chutkin, who is overseeing his criminal case, temporarily paused all procedural deadlines in the case while the appeal plays out. I know people are thinking, well, he's just going to delay it forever. No, he's not going to delay it forever. If there is a delay, it might be a couple weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe a month, but not enough to really have any impact. It will still go to trial and end well before the election. And again, like I've said before, based on what I think is going to happen, it almost doesn't matter. Once Donald Trump goes to the 2024 election, if he is the nominee or if he is not, once that's all said and done, the rest of his life is going to be in court, because not all these trials will finish by election time, and it really doesn't matter because he'll get convicted and then he'll appeal it, and for the next 5 years he will be in court, because these are criminal trials. He has to show up. He has to sit there. If asked to testify, he has to testify. This is not going to be a good end of his life experience for Donald Trump. Now, we know the Supreme Court on Friday rejected a request from Smith for the justices to immediately hear the case before the D.C. Circuit. Both sides will have the option of appealing the eventual ruling from the appeals court back up to the highest court. Now, Trump's team asked the appeals court earlier this month to examine the immunity ruling issued by Chutkin. Chutkin rejected Trump's immunity claims, writing in an opinion that his 4-year service as commander-in-chief did not bestow on him the divine right of kings to evade the criminal accountability that governs his fellow citizens. Chutkin also dismissed arguments from Trump's attorneys that the criminal indictment should be thrown out because he was working to ensure election integrity. No, he was doing just the opposite. As part of his official capacity as president, that's not the job of the president, not to try to overturn an election and then call it as you're just trying to police this. That's not something a president does. What he was doing was quite clear, and there is no argument about it. Trump's lawyers said Saturday that Chutkin missed what the founders recognized, that punishment of the president is irreducibly political and so belongs primarily to the branch most politically accountable, Congress and ultimately the Senate. You got a problem there, Donnie, if you want to leave it to Congress, even though that's not going to happen. The House has a very thin majority for the Republicans. But there's a lot of people would love to see you out of the motherfucking way. You might not be so lucky in the House of Representatives. And in the Senate, well, the Democrats have the majority, and you're done there. You're trying to play all these games, trying to get around things, trying to find loopholes, get over these hurdles. And it's getting to be too much for Donald Trump. You can see it in the way he talks and the way he looks. This is all taking a very heavy toll on him. And he's a 78-year-old man in not the best condition and not the best mental capacity. He always talks about Joe Biden being diminished, but I can tell you this, there are people around him and the things you see that show that, in fact, Donald Trump is a bit diminished. And all this stress and strain hanging over his head is just not helping matters much. He's losing it. There is no question about it. And to continue to try to make Joe Biden look like he's diminished is just not working. I'll be honest with you. I've heard Joe Biden say some things that sound a little goofy. I don't know that it was diminished cognizant ability or if it was just tied to his stuttering problem or just being 80 years old. I mean, you can expect that. But Joe generally knows his shit. And he's doing a good job given the age he's at. He's been probably one of the most productive presidents of all time. You can say whatever you want about him, but he's been effective. And at this point, I think Joe's fine. I think Donald Trump is in a lot of trouble in terms of his own physical and mental health. They're going to try to push this immunity thing, but as I've told you, it's not going to work. It can't work. It's a bullshit argument. Everybody who looks at it just goes, Jesus Christ, this is ridiculous. It is a Hail Mary pass. It is people flailing because they've got no place else to go. So um, I don't want you to worry about that. That's going to get overturned in the appellate court, and it's going to get overturned in the Supreme Court. And then Donald Trump's in a world of trouble. As I've said, in most of the cases he's being charged with, he always claims that he has this immunity. When the Supreme Court finally lays down the final word and says, Donald Trump, you have no immunity, that takes away a lot of his defense strategy. And there's no place else to appeal it after that. He's stuck with it. So he's gambling here a little bit. He's hoping that he'll get somebody to side with him. But that's how delusional he is. Nobody's going to side with him in this circumstance. It's not going to happen. So this is going to be a problem for his criminal trials coming up. We'll wait and see what happens with the Supreme Court and this decision by Colorado to take him off the ballot. That could be the death knell if the Supreme Court sides with Colorado. I know a lot of people say, oh, they'll never do that. They love Donald Trump. Well, the Supreme Court has some of their own problems. Their questionable integrity and credibility. They have to switch some things around because they know that 2024 is not that far off. And you piss off enough people, you're going to get that motherfucker stacked. And it's going to take away power from the existing Supreme Court justices. And there's going to be some investigations into some of the criminality and corruption with the likes of Clarence Thomas or Alito. So they've got a lot hanging over their head right now, too. This would not be the time to make a shitty, goofy, fucking questionable decision. All right. We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Every Christmas, it's a tradition for a president to make nice sentiments to the country as we have a Christmas holiday and as we look at the next year upcoming. It's not uncommon for former presidents to make those statements as well. Well, Joe Biden and Jill Biden put out a beautiful message, as they are wont to do. Donald Trump, on the other hand, went a different way. Big surprise, huh? A big surprise that Donald Trump might not be so compassionate on this special day for Christians. Donald Trump spent Christmas Eve ranting on his personal social media site, but his engagement seemed low as normal people spent the evening with family, friends, or caroling in church. Instead, Trump posted one rambling rant spraying conspiracy theories like Aquanet across the hair. I'm reading this. Crooked Joe Biden, crazy Nancy Pelosi, deranged Jack Smith, and demanding the House Select Committee that investigated the 2020 election and the January 6 attack be prosecuted for destroying and deleting all of their evidence, which is weird because they turned over all of their evidence to the FBI. And I think we as citizens can even access a lot of this evidence. So once again, Donnie Trump is making shit up. Now, Trump has already been told by a judge once that there was no destroying or deleting of evidence, but still he continues. Donald Trump is never slowed by the truth. He's going to say what he says. He comes out of his ass and he just says it, and he keeps repeating the lie until somebody believes it. Now, the only people that are going to believe Donald Trump's lies happen to be the base, and they're dumb fucks in the first place. But even the people that maybe once voted for Donald Trump, they're looking sideways at him now because they're tired of his bullshit and tired of his lying. Now, it's unclear if it was due to the slow retruth rate or lack of likes, but about 10 minutes later, Trump posted another rant, this time in all capital letters, as he loves to do. This time he attacked the House Select Committee, saying the same thing about them deleting evidence. 30 minutes after the post and about 15 minutes after the first all caps rant, Trump posted another all caps status attacking Biden and Smith again, using the same language about Smith being deranged. He repeated his signature language about being a victim and being persecuted. He ultimately ended the internet screaming with, "It's called election interference. Merry Christmas." Well, isn't that beautiful? But that's all so Donald Trump. This is what we've always said about Donald Trump. He is a narcissist. He will lie. He will bully. It's all about him. Nothing else matters. And when he starts to get cornered, he will immediately become the victim. We're seeing it happen in real time right now. Every time you hear about his retruths or being on television, he is being the stereotypical narcissist who's in fucking big trouble. You can tell he's nervous, he's scared. But, I think even more than scared, I don't think his delusional mind is able to allow him to see the trouble he's in. He's confused right now because the strategies he normally uses aren't working. I don't know that he's smart enough to be scared as yet, but it's coming. Trust me, it's coming. He's going to be shitting his pants. Well, he always shits his pants. So he's going to be doing something in addition to shitting his pants when he gets finally an understanding that he's fucking done and there's no way out. Now, the strategy worked. His supporters devoured all the all caps rant over his longer rambling diatribe with nearly twice the retruths. So what they're saying there is Donald Trump had the long and rambling things, and not too many people liked it. But once he did the short, it's called election interference, Merry Christmas, or those shorter claims, people ate that up. Now, why would that be? Well, because you've got Trump-la-fucks who are simple motherfuckers who don't like reading really well. They just like the rants and the raves and the names and all that shit. They're not a bright crowd, so naturally, they would like that kind of stuff better. He reposted an updated poll and seems to have backed away from the internet after that. The post came after Trump delivered his 2023 Christmas message that God will help him win in 2024. I talked to God. Said he ain't doing that. It's ironic that a guy who is so sinful likes to lean on God for things and think God is going to put favor into him. This goes back to the narcissism. He really believes that he's special. And he believes, I don't know that he believes there is a God, but he believes if there is one, the God knows he's special and he's going to treat him as such. I'm afraid he's going to be terribly disappointed because things aren't going to work well for him. Not at all. I've told you before, I'll tell you again, he's fucking done. Some people seem to think he'll slip out of all this stuff. He can't. If you sit down and look at it logically, there is no way out for Donald Trump. It's now just a matter of time. His delay tactics are only delaying the inevitable. He's not going to get out of this. He's finally been corralled, cornered, and he's done. We're just waiting for the end results, kind of like we're waiting for the decision in the New York lawsuit. He's already been found liable for committing pervasive and extensive fraud in business. We know he's already lost. We're now just waiting to find out how much it's going to cost him. And that's coming soon. That's when it will hit home, when they go in and start taking his shit, taking his money. I think Rudy Giuliani is finally realizing what's going on because the judge said, you can go get your money now. Now, talking about Rudy Giuliani, on Sunday, he offered a justification after he was found liable for defaming Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman. On his Sunday WABC program, Giuliani congratulated himself for a brilliant legal move. You lost the fucking case, dumbass. What brilliant move did you do? He said because he recommended that then President Donald Trump take his rigged election claims to state legislators instead of the courts after the 2020 presidential vote. This is what Rudy said. I went to Georgia, indicted. I went to Michigan. I went to Pennsylvania. I went to Arizona, and I went there and I testified and brought my witnesses. And I said, among other things, if we lose, we'll have a historical record. Yet we're going to prove this one day, Mr. President. He recalled telling Trump, I don't even realize that they're going to try to put us in prisons, arrest us, raid our apartments. I would have to turn my back on my client and double cross him, as unfortunately several people did, he continued before referring to the defamation case. And of course, he's talking about all the lawyers that have flipped on Donald Trump. Rudy goes on and says, and when I asked when I walked out of the verdict of 145 million, which I must say, there's a 145 million, they said, do you regret anything? He said, and I thought about it. And I said, no, because I did it for my country. You tried to overturn a fair and honest election. You tried to undermine democracy and overthrow the government, and you did it for your country. Nice try, motherfucker. Nobody's buying that bullshit. He goes on to say, now you may elect to believe that or not. You may think I'm self-aggrandizing. Yeah, I actually do, because that's all you do, you and Donnie Trump. He says, I did it all for my country because I knew something my fellow countrymen didn't know, and that is that we are on the verge of electing a 30-year career criminal as president of the United States. And if you do that, you're going to rot from the head down. Last week, Giuliani, of course, filed bankruptcy in response to the defamation judgment against him. It's ironic that he says you're about to elect a 30-year career criminal as president. He's talking about Joe Biden. But according to what we know about Donald Trump's fraud, that would really be more accurate for him, because Donald Trump has been committing tax crimes for 30 plus years, not Joe Biden. They want to make Joe Biden look like he's a criminal, but they're missing one important thing: evidence, proof. They have nothing, but they still want to push this narrative. They still think they have the ability and the power to get people to believe this. As I said, there is a certain amount of people, a certain faction of people that will believe it, but not enough to make a difference, and not anybody with a rational mind. So, Rudy, you can talk your shit all you want, but it's not going to get you anywhere. You are broke is a joke, and there's really no way out of this. He talks about appealing it. Well, good, Rudy. In order to appeal it, you're going to have to come up with at least 10% bond, which is $15 million. And it may be more than that. And then when you do go to your appeal, you're not allowed to bring in any new evidence. And since you supplied no evidence in the first trial, then you're fucked. You're just going to repeat what you just went through and lose again. So go ahead and try to appeal it. You're going to lose the money. I know Republicans love delaying the inevitable, and Rudy will try to do that, but I don't think he'll be very successful at that. Now, CBS correspondent Robert Costa said his source revealed that special counsel Jack Smith has a more sprawling case against Donald Trump than previously thought. Now, I've said this before. We know a lot about Donald Trump's corruption and crime and criminal behavior. But I think when the trials start up, there will be far more that we had no idea about. It'll be more egregious and more damning and more problematic for Donald Trump. Costa reacted to the news that the Supreme Court had given Trump a minor win by refusing Smith's petition to decide on the former president's immunity claims. Costa said, as I look ahead as a reporter, the campaign is going to come back again and again, and likely to the High Court, and how it's going to consider Trump's conduct in and around January 6th, Costa said. Whether it's the immunity question, whether it's about the January 6th defendants who have their cases coming before the Supreme Court, whether it's about how the court's going to proceed if Trump's convicted in the special counsel case. Costa said the question would be whether Trump conspired against the United States. Now, he says, based on our reporting at CBS News, the special counsel has phone records, he explained. He has memos and diary entries from key witnesses like former Vice President Mike Pence, key witness testimony from people who are inside the Oval Office with Trump. But they had something in the special counsel's office the January 6th committee never had, which is subpoena power to really go deep with witnesses and not just get public testimony and some depositions, he added. They've gone deep. And I've talked to people who participated in this investigation as lawyers, some even as witnesses. And it's evident to me, based on my conversation with sources, that Jack Smith has a sprawling case against former President Donald Trump. Now, CBS correspondent Jan Crawford predicted that the High Court would eventually strike down Trump's claims of presidential immunity. Well, of course they will. They're not going to rule that he's immune from criminal prosecution, she observed. And I don't even think it's going to be close. It could be 9-0. And it could be. It could be. People have often touted my predictions because a lot of them have come true. And it has nothing to do with me being smarter than anybody or being psychic or anything like that. It's a matter of taking a look at the facts and trying to figure out how it's going to play out. Now, sometime back when everybody was freaking out about Ron DeSantis, I said, I don't think he's going to be the candidate either. And now we're hearing this story, which would suggest I was right, which, I'm not trying to make out it's any big deal. Anybody who looked at it without emotion would have said the same thing. Ron DeSantis' pollster and top strategist thinks the Florida Republicans' presidential campaign is slowly dying. Somebody put it as if it's already in hospice. And I think that goes without saying. The early primary and caucus states demand pressing the flesh several times with candidates. They take it seriously. While DeSantis could get away with rallies in Florida, he must meet people in person in the early states. And he's an awkward motherfucker. He's weird. When he launched his campaign, he did it with an ad claiming on the eighth day God created Ron DeSantis. Sounds a lot like Donald Trump, doesn't it? In less than 3 months, as Mother Jones Nora Leonard wrote, even if DeSantis can overcome his awkwardness and has learned to make small talk, it's unclear whether he'll be able to hide his general weirdness once he steps more clearly onto the national spotlight. And that's exactly what we've seen. He has these weird facial expressions, his movements. I don't know. He just seems very, very awkward. And people don't cotton to it. They want somebody who looks strong and sure of himself, and that certainly is Donald Trump, even though he's a buffoon. People are taken in by that. Now, meanwhile, DeSantis started as a number 2 to Donald Trump, earning him a one-way ticket to months of attacks, mockery, and slow leaks from opposition research documents attacking the governor for more bizarre stories like eating pudding with his fingers. Now, that's not a big deal, but I would have to question, why with your fingers? You can't get a fucking spoon? The Times cited that Super PAC's chief executive quit, the board chairman resigned, and 3 top officials were fired, and then the chief strategist stepped down, all in less than a month. And this pretty much put DeSantis' candidacy in exactly the kind of chaos for which he once cast himself as an antidote. They went on to interview more than a dozen current and past DeSantis advisors, most of whom point to a disillusioned presidential candidacy. Mitt Romney's 2012 top strategist, Stuart Stevens, said that when voters thought they were getting Trump without the baggage, they were actually getting Ted Cruz without the personality. Cruz is generally regarded as the least liked senator in the body. And that's pretty much true. He is similar to Ted Cruz, but he's more awkward. He's not as bright, but he's equally as dangerous. There was a superficial impression that DeSantis was in the mode of big state governors who won Republican nominations and being successful, like Reagan, Bush, Romney. But DeSantis is a very different sort of animal, Stevens told the Time. These were positive, expansive, optimistic figures. DeSantis is not. He doesn't even realize how he's coming off. His self awareness is just fucking weird. I mean, I know when I'm talking to somebody, if I go off on a tangent and I realize, God, that sounds stupid, I pull back from that shit and I change it up. And I'm not even a politician. Ron DeSantis doesn't have that capability. He doesn't understand that what he's doing is wrong or weird or awkward. He doesn't get it. And because of that, people look at him unfavorably, even Republicans at this point. I've said before, once they thought Donald Trump had some baggage, they were willing to wrap their arms around anybody that looked good. So here's Ron DeSantis. He's 44 years old. He's saying all the things that Donald Trump said. He's appealing to the evangelicals. So, yeah, let's grab him and take him because we're desperate now. Donald Trump's in trouble. They didn't bother to look into him. They didn't bother to vet him. They didn't bother to test him to see if he was a good candidate. They just did it without thinking, and this is what they're stuck with. And as I promised, I don't think Ron DeSantis will be the nominee. I think for sure now he won't be the nominee. And it's Ron DeSantis' own fault. Hell, when he goes out and talks now, his wife does more talking than he does. And she's certainly better at it, but we're not looking at her becoming president. And how do you think the Republicans like the fact that a woman of all people is stepping up in front of their Lord and Savior, Ron DeSantis? They want their women standing behind their guy, and that's not happening in this case. So Ron DeSantis, every time he tries something different to look better, he just ends up looking worse. Now, as we were talking about, and a lot of people are worried about this, last week, the Supreme Court turned down special counsel Jack Smith's plea to rush Donald Trump's appeal straight to the high court so that it can be resolved quickly. Now, according to columnist Ron Brownstein, the Supreme Court isn't stupid. They know exactly what Trump is trying to do. They simply have to choose whether or not to be complicit. Political analyst Julian Zelizer began the conversation by saying that Trump's goal isn't to win, but to delay. If he can delay past the 2024 election, then he can demand that his attorney general stop his prosecution in 2025. But that's a big if he can win. And as I've told you, there is nothing that suggests he can win. Now, Brownstein said, as long as the case is resolved before the election, that is the key, really, said Brownstein. Trump's goal is to have it not be resolved. We see in polling that it may sound incredible given how much information is out there, but there's a significant slice of the voters that say that a conviction might not matter to them more than an indictment of Donald Trump. Now, so I say there is a faction of people that will say, I don't care if he's convicted. But there's a lot of people that will. And the people that will be troubled by Donald Trump's conviction will be enough in the Republican Party to still bury Donald Trump. He will get buried if he is the nominee. And that's why the Republicans have got to be finding themselves in a tough spot. They don't want to anger Donald Trump. He's got all this support. They want to win in 2024, but they know, trust me, they know that when Donald Trump is the nominee, they can't win. I'm sure they see the writing on the wall that they can't win with virtually anybody, but they feel like they might have a better chance with somebody who might be normal, because Donald Trump is far from normal. Now, Brownstein explained that people like Chief Justice John Roberts and the rest of the Supreme Court justices live in the real world. They know Trump is trying to push this out as far as he can, so it does not resolve before the election. And they have a choice to make whether they want to be complicit in that or not. He said that Robert is desperate for a unanimous decision on things like this that speak to the future of the power of the presidency, but it's a long shot. He said that the 2000 Bush v. Gore decision was the beginning of distrust of the high court in the eyes of the American public, and they are absolutely right. Brownstein said, I think he would like to avoid that. Maybe the way to do that is, in essence, join these two rulings. I'd also point out that that the idea clearly the indictments of Trump affect the nomination. Joe Biden's approval rating under 40%, and the two of them are running even. The idea that there is no resistance, no cost to Trump for his behavior is not supported by facts. And that's why I say, as much as many of you think that the Supreme Court will side with Donald Trump because they're so corrupt, don't get me wrong, they are corrupt, but they are looking at their future. And they know that Donald Trump is not a good train to jump on. They're going to want to save themselves. And Donald Trump is unsavable at this point. They don't want to go down with him, and they aren't going to go down with him. Now, I've been hearing, we've all been hearing about Donald Trump and his anti-Semitic remarks. And Michael Cohen, his former fixer, had some interesting points yesterday. Donald Trump has spent the better part of the last week trying to clean up his language after adopting some Adolf Hitler's ideology about blood purity. Now, according to former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, the ex-president knew exactly what he was doing. I mean, he was so close to Adolf Hitler that he had to know what he was doing. He was appealing to the white supremacists, the misogynists, the anti-Semites, the fucking dregs of society. Republicans struggled to try to dismiss the comment. Some claimed he was just joking, a common refrain of whatever objectionable thing the president, former president, has ever said. Well, that's not what he meant. He was just joking. Don't you get the humor? Here's what he really meant. It's funny, the Republicans, every time he says something stupid, which is frequent, they have to try to explain it. How about we get a president or a former president that just says what the fuck he means and doesn't have to be cleaned up afterwards? Now, other lawmakers went so far as to claim that it wasn't real and that Trump simply uses that kind of language to get Republican voters excited. Well, that's an interesting thing. In order to excite Republican voters, you've got to put out racist and Nazi fucking rhetoric. That doesn't say a lot for the Republican Party. Some some of them outright embrace it, while the Republican Party pretty much stayed silent. They know this is a big time fucking loser. When Trump appeared before another rally, he claimed he never read Hitler's book. Cable News unearthed an interview in which his first wife, Ivana, recalling his obsession with a book of Hitler's speeches he kept on his nightstand. So he may not have read Mein Kampf. I don't think he's read anything. I think he is all about reading short excerpts and people tell him what to think. Cohen said it's not true, obviously. It's just added to the plethora of lies that he told the American people while he was president or post his presidency. I mean, for God's sake, it's word for word out of Hitler's mouth, regurgitated by Donald Trump. And then all of a sudden, it's not the same thing, right? Now, of course, he's trying to walk it back, but that's something that he has done over and over and over again. Cohen went on to recall a meeting he wrote about in his book, Disloyal. Trump and another Trump organization executive who happened to be one of German descent was sitting next to Cohen, whose father is a Holocaust survivor. Now, Cohen said, Donald, knowing that my father is a Holocaust survivor, literally turned around, stopped the conversation, and made mention. He goes, I bet your family chased Michael's family through the Red Forest, he recalled Trump saying. I mean, I wrote about this, what, 3 years ago plus. So the fact is, everything that I have been saying for years now, it's slowly dripping out to be factually accurate. It's who he is. And if he thinks that he could lie and get away with it, that's just what he's going to do. He's gotten very good at it. Now, Acosta played another clip of Trump ranting. No one knows what's going on, and that children of immigrants are coming into the United States, and no one knows what language they're speaking. When he says nobody knows what's going on, no, 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 Donald doesn't know what's going on, said Cohen, and Donald doesn't speak any other language other than English. So I promise you that there are people in this country involved with the immigration service who know exactly what the language these people are speaking. Donald Trump is just trying to cover his tracks, and Donald Trump is very, very fucking bad at it. I don't even know if he believes this anti Semitism. I think he does. I think his father was an anti Semite, so he was raised by essentially a Nazi. So Donald Trump is going to continue to say stupid shit. And when he says this stupid shit and he gets called out for it, as he does every fucking time, they are going to have him walk it back. He's done this for the entire time he's been president. He's constantly saying shit. And then he comes back and says, "No, I never said that. Never said that at all." Or what I really meant is, or I was just joking. Think about how many times he has to do that. He has to walk something back or qualify it with, "I'm joking." He does this all the time. And part of the reason for that is because Donald Trump has no filter. Something comes in his head, it spews out of his mouth. He doesn't think about it. He doesn't even consider that it could be bad because it's coming out of his mouth. So it must be the gospel direct from Jesus. It's funny, a guy like this continually fails with the things he says, and he never learns the lesson. Never, ever learns the lesson. You would think once you make a mistake like that, you make sure that you don't make that mistake again. But Donald Trump is far too arrogant and far too narcissistic to think that he could ever be wrong. See, it's more than just denying he's wrong. He really believes he can never be wrong. That's the level of the psychosis that Donald Trump has. And that's something we have to consider. Um, Donald Trump probably has no idea how big a trouble he's in. He has no idea how he comes off when he speaks or stands there in front of you. He thinks he's the greatest guy in the world. He thinks that everything he's doing is perfect. He really honestly believes that. So this is why he's got to be taken down. He's never going to back off. He's never going to give in. So he has to be forced to give in with the courts one way or another. And I will tell you this, that's exactly what's going to happen. This is what happens with narcissists. They always fly high for a time, then they start to spiral. Ultimately, they crash and destroy themselves. And Donald Trump is very close to that moment in time. It's coming. No matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody thinks, the demise of Donald Trump is imminent. It's just a matter of time at this point. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I hope you have a great day. Merry Christmas. Hope you have a great holiday. We start the week. And then, of course, we've got the new year coming, and God knows what's going to happen in 2024. So have yourself a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.